because this is an emergency. You may need to run.
Right.
Because this elevated cortisol says there's danger. So forget reaching for some broccoli or salad. That's not going to help you to run. Reach for high calorie, high dense, quick processed food because you may need to fight, you may need to flee.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Breakthrough to Best Self with Holly and Lauren-Aaliyah. And it's wonderful to be back here with you once again. Today's topic, we're going to unpack something that so many people struggle with. Why can't we seem to stick to our healthy habits even when we want to? Lauren, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, hi everyone. Listen, this is something we hear all the time. I mean, it's stuff I've said often, right? So it's not just things we hear in our coaching work, but I've certainly said it where I can start off really strong with a new habit. I'll set an intention about a new diet or new movement, and then of course it just comes crashing down. And so it's something I think a lot of us can relate to where I know what to do. I know exactly what I want to achieve, but then I just can't do it. So it's extremely frustrating. And more often than not, we end up just blaming ourselves, right? We just end up blaming ourselves. So if you have ever been in a situation where you feel like you just keep starting over with this habit, it's just not sticking, and you've thought, gosh, something must be wrong with me, then this episode today is exactly for you. Carls, we're going to start off talking about this myth of willpower. And I call it a myth because as we go through today's episode, I think we're going to unpack whether, willpower alone or the lack of willpower or discipline is the only driving force here. And certainly, again, I'll go back to the example of dieting because that's one I'm extremely familiar with as somebody who has spent many, many, many years trying to get control over my food. And it's the reason I went off and trained in food addiction recovery because of years of frustrating starts. Day one, oh, I'm back on my diet again and again and again. And how many times, for those of us who've had this yo-yo dieting experience, have we had a plan? And the key to dieting, we were told, is just stick to the plan. Stick to the plan, be disciplined. Here's the plan, here's the breakfast, lunch, dinner. And I think of another plan I was given by my personal trainer. And maybe there's many more examples that our viewers or those listening in could think about is how many times have you been told that sticking to a plan is just about discipline? And therefore, if you don't stick to the plan, you lack discipline, you lack willpower. But here's the challenge for us for certainly through today's episode is just consider this. What if it's not about willpower at all?
Right.
Today, let's talk about some of the other aspects that may be driving this not being able to stick to our healthy habits. Let's talk about that a bit more. Holt, what do you got?
Absolutely. And, as you were saying that out loud, it was almost like you were speaking my story. And you know this. How many times have we said, I just don't have enough willpower. I don't know what's wrong. I don't have enough willpower. And I want to talk a little bit about the science behind this, about the fact that many of us in our fast-paced, highly stressful lifestyles, um, it's just the way the world's made up, and we're busy and we're running and we've got a lot of things going on in our lives. And many of us are under chronic stress. And when we're under chronic stress, our prefrontal cortex, also called our frontal lobe, the part of our brain that's responsible for decision making and motivation and impulse control, it actually starts to shut down. And that's where the willpower lives, is in that area of the brain. But when we're stressed to the max, which I think most people can relate to this at one time or another, we go into survival mode. And, something that's really interesting is that, research shows that what we often label as laziness or inconsistency can actually be the result of something that's happening in our bodies, especially when we're under chronic stress. You know, I'll give you an example. Ongoing stress can raise the levels of stress hormones like cortisol in our bodies, and this actually makes our cells more resistant to insulin. And that means that our blood sugar becomes harder to regulate. And that constant energy crash creates a feeling of being foggy and sluggish, unmotivated. It's not lazy, you guys. We're just physically
Right.
depleted.
Mm.
And I'm going to tell you an affirmation in a moment that I use. So anyway, another thing is sleep. Okay, sleep is huge. There's a study out there, and it's published in the Academy of Management Journal. And it found that sleep deprivation actually lowers our ability to regulate our emotions and control impulses. So this means that it's harder to stay consistent with healthy choices, when we're tired. And I think maybe we have
Yeah.
all had that lived experience of how that feels. And I just want to put this out here. This is not a personal failure. When you add unstable blood sugar and lack of sleep to the mix together, this affects our mood and our energy. So you can see how quickly it becomes this physiological loop. Here's an affirmation that I use because I've been I'm a recovering workaholic, okay? And I looked at rest as something else. Laziness, you could use that word, but it isn't anymore. My affirmation is rest is productive. And that, let me tell you, that's a game changer. When you allow yourself to know that you are worthy of having a restful moment, you're not weak, you're just overloaded. So,
Right.
Lauren,
Right.
what would you like to
Yeah.
reflect on that?
So that's an important, yeah, an important point. You're not weak, you're overloaded. And I think that the studies, certainly the research that you mentioned around, sleep deprivation and the fact that it actually lowers our ability to control impulses. I think that's really important to notice, and the fact that chronic stress plays a role in how we may be feeling about being motivated, because the fact that it actually has this knock-on effect that makes us feel sluggish or unmotivated. And this may be the reason that your gym plans, are falling by the wayside despite your best efforts. So I think it's such an important reframe for our listeners to hear that this is not about being weak or being weak-willed. Sometimes it's just about being overloaded. And so when we're in that state, tired, dysregulated, maybe even like you mentioned, riding that blood sugar roller coaster,
Right.
it's not unmotivated, it's not weak, it's our body literally prioritizing survival over self improvement. So you may have a self improvement goal that says, I really want to get fit and I want to go to the gym. I want to start this new hobby. I want to start journaling, whatever this new self improvement thing that's going on. But internally, your body says, oh no, we need to survive first. And part of that is that response. So that's why, I always say, if you've been struggling to stick to healthy habits, it's not about doing more or trying harder, because quite often that's what we do. It's like, push yourself, try harder, you're not trying hard enough. So often it's about just pausing and asking, what's actually happening underneath here? What is going on that's making it so difficult for me to follow through on this intention that I've set for myself? Is my nervous system overwhelmed? And we'll talk about the nervous system in a minute. Am I emotionally depleted? Am I tired, like you were saying? Do I need to rest? Rest is productive. Am I running on empty and I'm still expecting myself to operate at 100%? Because the real change, and certainly I've experienced this and I see this in my clients all the time, It doesn't happen when we're in this fight flight mode. You spoke about stress hormones being like cortisol being elevated. When we are in that fight flight mode, meaning the nervous system is really highly activated, it's really difficult to make lasting change. But when we feel safe, we feel supported, we feel emotionally and mentally regulated, then we show up for ourselves. Then it's easier to eat clean, get the movement, start the journaling, all the wonderful things that we've set for ourselves, right? So let's talk, Holly, a little bit about self-sabotage, because that's another word that comes up often, or phrase, when we talk about habits and not sticking to our habits. We often, we told about self-sabotage. It's like, I'm stopping myself from doing it. And we think of it as some way that we ruin our progress. We holding ourselves back. But actually, self-sabotage, and again, I'm going to use that phrase loosely because it's a phrase that we use commonly. But self-sabotage is actually our brain's way of trying to protect us of something that the brain perceives as a threat. Now, that may sound strange, but here's what's going on. Let me just explain what is actually going on. When we start something new, so we've set up a new diet, a new habit, a new movement, a new self-care practice, it's a healthier routine. It's what we really want. I'm going to start setting some boundaries about my time. I'm going to change the way I eat. They're all really positive intentions. But the brain may associate that with risk of trying something new and failing, risk that I don't know exactly how to do this properly. So risk of discomfort, risk of judgment. Others may judge me. So even if consciously we want the change, often there may be a deeper subconscious or unconscious thought pattern or path that says, hold on a second, this change is not safe. So what you find is that it starts pulling you back from implementing the change. That's not self-sabotage. That pulling back is not to punish you, it's to protect you. So until we can help that part of ourselves feel safe. So first of all, knowing what is causing the breaks on this new habit. That's the work. What is causing resistance? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? And then working with that helps us to lower the barrier to that change or that habit. And then we can move forward. Okay, does that makes sense, right, Holly? This issue of self-sabotage. So instead of asking, why do I keep self-sabotaging myself? Try asking a totally different question. Which part of me is trying to protect me and from what? Then that question opens the door to us being a bit more compassionate with ourselves and then working on healing what it is that we perceive as a threat when it comes to this change. So yeah, that's subconscious stuff. Well, you and I both work a lot with the unconscious or subconscious mind. Your thoughts on this?
There's so much assistance that our brain can give us when we tie in the subconscious or unconscious part of our brain. If we are working strictly from the frontal lobe, then we have a smaller portion of the brain to work with. So when we start to tie in subconscious beliefs and emotional associations around health, we can bring in a larger portion of our brain. And also there's something to be said, and Lauren, you and I do this in our practice all the time, which is helping people discover emotional regulation tools that can help them through some of these uncomfortable times that we might experience when we're implementing new, whether we're uncomfortable with the thought of, am I safe? So we're trying to find out what's protecting us. But then also, are there emotions that are contributing to that stress we were talking about previously? Or surrounding any associations that go along with I'm not I'm letting go of this particular. I'm going to use food as an example because you and I, we have had the personal experience, and also that's something that we've trained in. So if you think about it, if you've been using food to soothe your stress or numb your discomfort, which I'm going to raise my hand and say I did that for decades. I didn't know, I didn't have the tools and the skills to work through my emotions. So I wanted to soothe myself, and that's what I learned from young. That was a way to do that. I numb myself from this discomfort. But guess what? I also numb myself from the joys of life as well. But suddenly removing that substance without replacing the emotional safety, that can trigger a sort of rebellion in your brain that says, no, 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 no. I need to soothe. This is a very uncomfortable feeling, emotion, experience. And so we can learn tools and skills like tapping, like breath work, like mindfulness, like working with you or I, or both of us even, on some emotional processing techniques. There are so many ways that we can address this portion of the experience that can alleviate the need to go to a substance to sort of help with the discomfort. We can do it in a more natural way. And the thing about emotional stress, it activates the amygdala. That's the brain's alarm system. And we can help with the sort of techniques that you and I offer, like hypnotherapy, NLP work, tapping, sound, and even working one-on-one to do these emotional regulation practices. So it can be rewired. There's hope,
Yeah.
you guys. There's hope. Now, I
Yeah.
want to get into
Yeah.
another section of this, Lauren. Well, unless you had something before. Um,
Yeah, so I just wanted to say, just to bring it back to like what you're talking about on emotional regulation and using some of those emotional regulation tools to deal with that. I'm going to bring it back to habits. And I'm thinking of one where we were saying that sometimes this fear, this stress is what's stopping us. And I'm thinking of, every time, particularly when I was really struggling with weight gain, and I really just was so ashamed of my body shape and size. And I would set these um, intentions of starting a new workout routine. And, Monday, I'm going to be back in the gym and I'm going to work out 3 times a week. And something that I'm just remembering is how very real the fear of judgment of my body and
oh
seeing
yeah.
myself in those the gym mirrors,
Yep.
or being afraid that others would see me, or being so uncomfortable in these gym clothes. Those big emotions and that fear and that stress of having to be in the gym would stop me from following through on this habit that I'm trying to do. So I'll go once or twice, but the more I have the discomfort, and so that pause that we were talking about
Yes.
of figuring out what is it I'm feeling and what is it I'm thinking, and then using a tool that will help you. And whether it's breathing through it, whether it's using, you mentioned affirmations earlier, just using this affirmative language, or using a tool like tapping, or breath work that helps us in the moment just to get out the door, to get the gym shoes on, to get the workout clothes on, to get in the car, to get there. I can tap or breathe my way in just to get to the gym. But for the deeper stuff, where there really is some subconscious or unconscious thought patterns or beliefs, we may be needing to use some deeper stuff. But I digress. Let's go on, Hals. You were saying that there's another aspect to this, and we've touched on stress, which ties into the nervous system, right? So what we're hearing through this discussion is that beyond willpower and the decision that we've made and the plan that we have, there really is a need for us to assess what's going on with our nervous system, because there is a direct correlation between the nervous system and what we call habit consistency. When we're feeling stressed or anxious or overwhelmed, we said our bodies go into survival mode, what we call that fight, flight or freeze mode. And in that state, our brain is not focused on the long-term goal. It's not focused on this new self-development habit that it's focused on getting through this moment. Don't die. You got to fight, you got to flee, you got to freeze, you got to fall, you got to do something to survive. And when you are in survival mode, it's really, really, really difficult. So instead of reaching for the healthy food, going out on the walk, your brain starts to push you towards what it thinks is like comfort food. Get high calorie food, eat high sugar, high fat combinations, because this is an emergency. You may need to run.
Right.
Because this elevated cortisol says there's danger. So forget reaching for some broccoli or salad. That's not going to help you to run. Reach for high calorie, high dense, quick processed food, because you may need to fight, you may need to flee. Or in some cases, if you're going to go into the freeze mode, you may be like, I'm just going to sit here and keep scrolling on my phone because I can't walk out the door. I'm just going to sit and stare at the TV because I can't go and do anything else. So all of those responses may be actually as a result of your nervous system being activated. And so the answer could be about actually looking at, how do I calm my nervous system down? How do I activate the parasympathetic nervous system? Holly, any experience with this where you noticed, just that kind of heightened sense of activated nervous system having an impact on healthy habits?
100%. 100%. I think everyone in our lives can think of a time where you were so activated by something that happened that you could just feel it in your body. And it's in your body, it's in your mind, it's everywhere. It's in your emotions. It's the full on experience. And yes, many times I have had clients come to me in that state. And in that state, it's very difficult for us to stick with these choices that are these new habits that we're developing. When our nervous system is activated, just like you said, that survival mechanism comes into play. It's either hide, run, freeze, all of it is happening. Now, the beauty of this, and this has happened with client after client, is finding the modality or modalities that help bring that that activate the parasympathetic nervous system and bring that nervous system back down into a state of calm. I work at a college and I have students who take exams and they get their nervous system gets activated. And what I've found is when I sit down with them and I talk to them, when we do a little bit of breath work or we do a little bit of sound therapy, they become much calmer. And all of a sudden, now they can remember their coursework and the answers, and they actually do so much better on their tests. So it's true that we can have quite an effect on our nervous system. So when our nervous system feels safe, we can truly make those aligned choices. And when it doesn't, we just stay stuck in old patterns. But the good news is even if I'm stuck in an old pattern today, tomorrow or tonight, I can work on calming techniques and we can try again.
Yeah.
Lauren, I want to ask you about one more thing that plays big time into this. And it's about being tired. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Right. That's an important one. So, yeah, we speak about stress and chronic stress in the way that our lives are just stress, but sometimes it's just, like we were saying earlier, your brain is just overloaded. Think about how many just decisions we make in a day, like how many choices, decisions, there's constant decision making that we're making from the time we wake up till the time we go to bed. This machine up here is constantly being loaded, okay? And there's lots of information coming in, there's lots of information being interpreted, and we just get mentally tired. We just mentally tired. And sometimes we have something called decision fatigue. Like, I just don't want to make another decision today. I've been making a decision from, what clothes I should wear this morning to what I should have for breakfast to the 101 decisions I've made throughout the day, choices that I've made. And it just becomes harder and harder the more my brain gets tired. And so we can get to a state of just literally decision fatigue. And it means that the more choices you have to make in a day, the harder it becomes to make good ones. And so add to that the effects of ultra-processed foods, which so many people are still, that's the bulk of so many people's diet. I think about the standard American diet, which has become the standard global diet, I'm afraid.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that we handed that over to the rest of the world. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that food pyramid. Thank you. But you and I work in addiction recovery, food addiction recovery, and this is what we work with. We work with the effects of processed foods on the brain, where these so-called foods, these Franken foods, actually flood the brain with these quick hits of dopamine, our feel-good chemical. And over time, the brain's reward system literally gets burnt out, and it just makes it so hard to feel motivated. So understanding that this tired brain, this overstimulated, tired brain, which again may be burnt out because of overstimulation from processed foods, it just makes it really, really, really difficult. And so when you're running on empty, it's really difficult to think about some sort of broad, long-term goal that you're working on. It just feels too exhausting. And so no wonder we go, oh, I'll start the diet next week. Oh, I'll get to the gym next week. Oh, I can't do this today. I've been twice this week and I just can't go again. So think about that the next time that you are saying, I'm just so weak-willed and I got no willpower. Why am I not sticking to my habits? Think about all the things we've spoken about, and certainly being exhausted, brain tired is one of them also.
Big time. Thank you, Lauren. I'm just going to throw it out here. What can we do? What does help in these scenarios? Okay? We always like to throw out some ideas. So we can start with awareness and let go of willpower. We can say, okay, I'm aware that I'm stressed. I'm aware that I'm being triggered at work, or that, if I could work on this part of being calm, that maybe I could actually feel less keen on jumping into the food or something else to make things better. We have what we call habit anchors. Habit anchors. Okay, so here's an example. Before I have my meal, I take 5 deep breaths. Or here's another one. Before I have my meal, and of course I'm just using this as meal, but there's many ways you can apply this. I sit down at the table with, my feet on the floor, my hands on the table. I pick up the fork, I have a bite, and then I set it down in between just to slow things down. This is a habit anchor. And then, of course, you can use many different calming techniques like sound therapy, tapping, grounding. I love grounding. I love to go outside, take my shoes off, and walk in the green grass and look at the sky. Very calming technique. Lauren, what would you like to add to this conversation?
Yeah, well, I think, just to maybe at this point just summarize everything that's come out of today's discussion. And we're answering the question, of course, why can't I stick to my healthy habits? And what's coming out of everything that we've spoken about so far is that sustainable change, so sustainable habit maintenance, if you like, is only going to happen when our mind and body feel safe enough to change and not pressured to. So instead of asking, why can't I stick to this? We can ask, what part of me still feels unsafe about this change? And sometimes the missing piece isn't more discipline, the stick we use to beat ourselves, more willpower. Sometimes it's a deeper shift. It's an emotional or a mental breakthrough that's needed. And so, yeah, I just, hoping that answers that wonderful question that we ask all the time is, why can't I stick to it? There's nothing wrong with you. This is not failure. This is your brain or your body protecting you from something that it perceives as danger. And our job is to be aware of that, to stand in the space of that, and to ask, what is it I'm afraid is going to happen if I make this change? And then to look at that and work out ways to remove the stress and the fear. And suddenly habits become a little bit more easier, right, Halls? I'm going to say anything in closing, Holly, as we draw this episode to a close?
Yeah, I just want to invite everyone who's watching today, just a possible reflection. Where in your life do you feel stuck repeating old patterns? That might be the very place where your breakthrough is waiting. So thank you guys for sticking out with us to the end of this recording, this end of our podcast. We would love for you to share this episode with anyone you think might find this interesting or helpful. Subscribe. Leave a comment. We love to reply to comments. Please leave a comment. Here's the thing. We are here. We're walking this journey right along with you. And I just want you to know that Lauren and I, we are right here. And there's some exciting things that are coming down the pipe. So please stay tuned, come back, and we're ready to have this next breakthrough together. Thank you, everyone, for watching.
Thank you, guys. See you in the next episode.